This is Connecting Point with Pastor Wayne Cordero.
To John and Patsy Ramsey, the newborn baby came, bringing trailing clouds of glory to their beautiful domain. And as she grew, she glimmered like a sunny winter day. Her face glowed like an angel's, and it was JonBenet. No one on earth can understand the intricate web of the Master's plan to send to earth for a blink of an eye a tender child destined to die. And so it was with JonBenet, who touched the heart of God. And he was there on that fateful day with his tear, his staff, his rod. You were never of the world, he said, just as I of the world was not. But for a time you blessed the world, and your life was not for naught. For today on earth the world mourns, and God reaches from afar to hold the hearts of those who weep for this tiny shooting star.
This is Connecting Point Live with Pastor Wayne Cordero and the second half of his interview with John and Patsy Ramsey.
By the time JonBenet was murdered, her parents, John and Patsy, already had a track record with God. Their faith was tested with the death of their oldest daughter in a car accident and Patsy's diagnosis of ovarian cancer. They knew God to be faithful in seeing them through crises. But how could they bear this one? Why would a good God let their precious daughter be murdered? Why would he allow such false accusations and persecutions of his faithful followers? Would you at this time welcome back to Connecting Point Live, John and Patsy Ramsey. Thank you for being with us, John. Please have a seat.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Connecting Point Live. Your story is an intriguing story of all kinds of accusations, spins, and then you having to go through it, especially not only with one child, but now two. And it seems like something that would test a faith to its very core. Was there any time that you just wanted to just throw it all in and say, just forget it?
Well, when I received the phone call that my daughter Beth had been killed in an automobile accident, it was noon on Friday. I'll be honest, the first words out of my mouth were, there is no God, there is no God. I was just screaming that out. And so that was probably the low point of my faith. And frankly, up to that point, I really hadn't had to face severe difficulty and really test my faith and examine God's promises. You know, what fragile foundation was there was put there by my mother taking us to church every Sunday when we were kids and kind of building that foundation. But thankfully it held and it built from there. But
you know, JonBenet's face was in the newspaper. It must have been every day for weeks, it seemed like, and on CNN and ABC and NBC. When you saw your daughter's face, Patsy, was it a tough thing for you? I mean, would you just turn off the news?
We really didn't see that. We took television, like I said, we weren't in our home for 6 months afterwards. We took television out of our home for about 4 years afterwards because we couldn't risk turning it on. I mean, the last time I watched television, I just kind of was flipping through it and bumped into Geraldo Rivera having a mock trial of the Ramseys, and he was, you know, there was like a studio audience, and they were saying, you know, they're guilty, and all I could hear was crucify them, crucify them. I mean, it was just, you know, I just couldn't believe it. I spent 3 days in bed after that, and John said, you know, it's out of here. We're not. So we didn't have TV for about 4 years. We didn't take a newspaper. Rarely saw any of those magazines. People would tell us about them, but.
Boy, that was a tough one on your faith. And John, you know, you said in your book, I had to trust the system. I just had to leave it to the system. What did you mean by that?
well, we were certainly caught up in the justice system, and it certainly didn't appear to be working to us, and it wasn't at that point. But the people that were around us said it would work, it will work, be patient. And we had no other choice. There's no really recourse or place to go to address that kind of difficulty or that, that kind of flaw when you're in the middle of it. You just have to persevere and go through it. And thankfully, the system did work. And it made me realize how important a jury is. Obviously, a grand jury looked at our case and said no. And I will always be available for jury duty now that I see how important it is. That's the point at which justice comes into our system. Up until that point, it can be pretty one-sided.
Patsy, your daughter died on Christmas, and usually it would make Christmas a very, very tough time when it would reoccur each year because of the memories. But you said in the book that you embrace Christmas and you're not afraid of it.
I always loved Christmas. Loved all the pageantry that went with Christmas. And the children were always in the Christmas pageant at church, and Christmas was a very big deal at our house. And after this happened, I remember the approaching first Christmas after losing Jean Bonnet, and I remember just throwing myself down on our bed in our bedroom and just screaming at God, saying, how can I celebrate Christmas again? I don't want to have anything to do with Christmas. I just want it to get over with, and I can't handle Christmas anymore. And it is as though a voice from heaven said, Patsy Ramsey, you need Christmas more than anyone. I was like, where did that come from? And it was just the Holy Spirit, I believe, talking to me and telling me that if we had not had the birth of Jesus Christ, then I would never have the hope of seeing Jean Bonnet again. So I got rid of all the Santa Clauses and all of the reindeer and all of that, left the nativity, and I have these 3 beautiful wise men. And we must, absolutely must, remember the real reason we celebrate Christmas. And of course, Easter is the icing on the cake. That's what differentiates us from every other religion. Buddha was born. Everybody else was born, but they weren't resurrected like our Jesus was.
What a great faith you have. That's just wonderful. Thank you.
When we come back, Pastor Wayne will continue his intimate interview with John and Patsy Ramsey.
Welcome back to Connecting Point Live. We're here with John and Patsy Ramsey, the parents of Jean Bonnet. John, Romans 8:28 says, all things work together. He causes all things to work together for good to those that love God and are called according to his purpose. John, do you feel that this is working together for good somehow?
It is, and we've seen wonderful examples of that. And if we had time, I'd love to tell you about it. But we've seen that in this whole horrible process of God taking things that were meant for evil and turning them into things that were ultimately good.
Do you feel saddened that Jean Bonnet did not live out the purposes of her life?
Well, see, we don't know. And the poem that was read earlier with the video, it changed my life when I read that poem, because it speaks about Jean Bonnet's purpose, that God sent her to earth to be with us for a while, and that she would do a job for him, and then he would call her home. I don't believe Jesus wanted this to happen. I don't believe God is not the author of evil, but she had a mission in her life. And all the cards and letters and emails we received of people coming to Christ because of Jean Bonnet, even after her life on this earth was over, she's still ministering to people, and people are still coming to Christ because of her.